Welcome to Passages Pulse, where we track the heartbeat of Israel and the Middle East from a Christian perspective. In a time of confusion, division, and misinformation, we're here to help you cut through the noise with truth, clarity, and conviction. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Passages Pulse. My name is Sebastian. At the time of this recording, it is August 27, 2025. We're recording this on Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm here with my co-host, Josiah. Hey, Josiah, how's it going?
It's going well, Sebastian. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I wanted to give a shout out to all of our alumni friends who traveled with us this summer who are probably going back to school right now. I know many schools are going back to school, so I hope you're enjoying your first week of being back to class. And with that, as you're telling your friends about Israel, about your trip, some questions may come up. And one of the big questions that might be mentioned this week, it's about a recent incident that took place in Israel in the war with Gaza. On Monday morning, this week, 20 people were killed on a strike on this hospital called Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza. The story is dominating the headlines right now. And like I said, your friends might be asking you about this. So we thought it would be a good idea to discuss this, to bring you some facts, some analysis, to give you some resources that can help you navigate conversations about this issue. We are going to talk with Josiah about what happened. Was it necessary, the strike on this hospital? What are Israel's obligations in warfare? And how should we respond to these accusations online or even accusations in person that are going on regarding this situation? So let's get started. So grateful that Josiah is here to break this down for us. So Josiah, the fact is that an Israeli tank fired 2 shells at a hospital, apparently without warning, and 20 people were killed. Several of them were journalists. So tell us what happened and why it happened.
Yeah, I'll throw a photo up. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you're able to see a bit of a visual of what actually happened. As you can see, if you are looking at the visual, this was a strike on an exterior stairwell on the outside of the hospital building, Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza. And Sebastian, you already laid out some of the basic facts in terms of what happened, how many people were killed. Bit of background, I think, in terms of Israel's explanation for why this took place. So this stairwell is known for being a place where there are typically quite a few journalists. It has some views of different parts of southern Gaza, which photographers or videographers like to capture. And there was a camera set up on towards the top of that stairwell, which was capturing a live feed of southern Gaza. And it was Israeli intelligence believed that camera was not just capturing a live feed, but was also being used to record or capture information regarding IDF troop movements in the area. And then perhaps was giving that either as a live feed or recording of that information to Hamas, that it was essentially the journalist operating the camera was a Hamas informant or was working for Hamas, and Hamas was using that position at the top of the stairwell as a surveillance base, essentially. So using the hospital for surveillance purposes or for command and control purposes to target IDF troops. So that's why Israel claims that it targeted the camera. You can see in another photo a visual of the camera that was then recovered after the strike. And this, again, was the basic reason why the strike took place. Was there was a concern specifically about the use of this camera or these cameras to surveil, monitor IDF troop movements, which would be considered an act of hostility against Israel and the IDF. Given all of this information, that's why Israel chose to strike, or at least the explanation that they've given for the strike against the hospital.
Well, this is not the first time, right, Josiah, that something like this has happened. What I meant to say is there are journalists, people who appear to be journalists, who may not be actually journalists. Can we talk about that real quick? About how many people in Gaza may throw on a vest that says press, but later actually Israel has discovered that some of them were actually terrorists, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated issue. I think, when we're breaking down here, was this actually a legitimate strike or not, or is Israel's explanation credible or not? I think there's 2 issues here. One, should they be striking a hospital? And second, should they be attacking a journalist or a group of journalists? And that's one of the keys here, is that Israel claims that 6 Hamas operatives were killed in the process of taking out this camera, or their surveillance position, as they refer to it. but also there were 5 to 6 journalists killed. And so that's the other issue here when you're trying to break down should Israel have done this or not, you have to ask this question, why are you attacking journalists? Are journalists really military targets or not? And to your point, Sebastian, there's this complicated history of journalists masquerading as Hamas operatives or doubling as Hamas operatives. That includes journalists who crossed the border on October 7, who were
Hmm.
embedded among Hamas fighters and were helping to record a lot of the terrible footage that came out after and was used as propaganda or tools of psychological warfare. There are journalists who have participated in helping to capture and disseminate videos of hostages. There was even a freelance journalist who held 3 hostages in his home who were eventually rescued by the IDF, and he was killed during that rescue operation
Yeah.
last year. So yes, it's true that
There
you
was
have this
another
weird
guy.
dynamic.
Sorry, this guy that you mentioned, I think, is the guy who also apparently received some support as a nonprofit from American money. But the other guy, the other famous, I think, Al Jazeera journalist, who there's a famous
Mhm.
picture of Yahya Sinwar kissing him, and he apparently was very beloved by the leader of Hamas. So
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I just wanted to highlight that there are people here who pretend to be journalists, but really they're working for Hamas PR. But let's not assume that that's the case for every single journalist in Gaza. So sorry
Yeah.
to cut you off. Keep going. What about is Israel's explanation credible?
Yeah, no, and that's I think the question that the people are asking right now is this actually the rationale that they've given? They did a investigation. They said that there's still a little more that needs to be investigated, which maybe we can get to in a few minutes about what that looks like. But I think the question everyone's asking is even after the initial results of the investigation, where they said, okay, our intelligence tells us this camera was being used for surveillance. Is that good enough? Is that explanation good enough? And I think it depends. There's still more that needs to be learned and determined. I think if you're a very harsh critic of Israel, you're going to argue that this was, a convenient excuse to kill journalists. You do hear that rhetoric online a lot right now. You have to, on the flip side of that, be willing to wrestle with the fact that, as we've just described, some journalists really are terrorists or Hamas operatives. And so you can't discount the possibility that that was actually the case in this situation. I would say it's, to me, not 100% clear yet. I'm hoping the investigation, which is ongoing, will deliver some more clarity about that issue. The second issue I think that is really at stake here is, should the hospital have been a target? Even if you are worried about journalists capturing information, giving it to Hamas, okay, does that necessarily mean that the hospital is a valid target or that the hospital is being used by Hamas? And there I think you do have, again, a little bit of a gray area here. Some details still need to be investigated and published, but if you're looking at the track record of this hospital, yeah, it's possible that it was being used by Hamas. Very possible, because there's a long history of that over the course of the war. In the early days of the war, the hospital was being used to hold several hostages. There are hostages coming out who have been released who gave testimony saying that there were 10 to 12 hostages in a room, meaning that there were at least multiple rooms. So you're talking about tens or dozens of hostages that were supposedly held in this hospital during the early days of the war after October 7. You also have reported cases where Hamas officials were using it as a base of operations. They were working in the hospital, using it as a command and control center, that sort of thing. Or cases in which more recently, this hospital denied staff of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, allegedly, they denied them treatment after they were hurt or required medical treatment, supposedly at the orders of Hamas to not treat these individuals from the humanitarian foundation. So there is a lot of evidence to suggest that Hamas does have its hooks in this hospital. It's using it for its own purposes. It has been since October 7. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that this specific strike was perfectly legitimate, but it does suggest that Israel had some reason to believe going into the situation on Monday that yeah, this hospital is not being used the way that it's meant to be used, that Hamas is using it for its own purposes the way that it has for almost 2 years now.
Yeah, so we're about to talk about Israel obligations under international law when it comes to conflict. Let me just mention an issue regarding this. Hospital, according to the Geneva Convention, I did a little research. Article 19 of the Geneva Convention says that a hospital can become a military target if it's being used to store weapons, ammunition, to harbor combatants, or use as a command center, launch site, or surveillance post.
Hmm.
So, according to the Geneva Convention, if a hospital is being used by this, it is a legitimate target.
I
But
do want to
what?
make one
Yeah,
clarification, Sebastian, just briefly before we go on. When we say harboring combatants, we don't mean offering medical treatment to combatants. So Hamas fighters can be treated in the hospital for their injuries, and that would not nullify the hospital's protected status under the Geneva Conventions, because hospitals usually have protected status until they become a building used for military purposes. When we say harboring combatants, what we mean is someone's using the hospital to shoot at someone from inside the hospital, for example, or they're running there and hiding from someone who's chasing them, even if they don't require medical treatment. That's what we mean by harboring combatants.
exactly right. So, what are the other obligations that democracy like Israel should have in a conflict like this, according to international law?
Yeah, and if you're looking at the Geneva Conventions or other forms of international law, I think high level, I'm just going to speak in high level terms because we could spend an hour talking about just this alone. You're supposed to prevent harm to civilians when possible. You're supposed to prevent harm to civilian infrastructure when possible. The exception being if there is a legitimate military objective, then a small degree of civilian harm or harm to civilian infrastructure is acceptable, assuming that it is no more than that which is necessary to achieve that legitimate military objective. That's the basic principle of proportionality. Proportionality under international law or just war theory doesn't mean that you kill one person, I kill one of your people, and we call it even. No, it means that a proportionate response or proportionate action is that which is necessary to achieve legitimate military objective and no more. Now, hospitals, again, as you've just explained, do have protected status normally, but can lose that in the event that they become a military facility, essentially, or are used for military purposes. Then it's no longer considered pure civilian infrastructure, and so the rules do change a little bit under those situations. Even in a situation like that, if you're going to target something like a hospital, you are supposed to clearly designate whether you consider it a hospital or not. You're supposed to give a warning if possible. And you're supposed to try to otherwise avoid those facilities or work around them until it becomes clear that someone inside that building is trying to harm you. So that's really the crux of the matter is someone in that building trying to harm you, and are you able to stop them from doing so without killing more people than is necessary to stop them doing whatever they're doing? If Israel's claims are true, then I think this strike appears to be relatively proportionate. I'll throw the photo of the building up again.
Yes.
What stands out to me is that it doesn't appear, and I haven't heard reports of the hospital having to stop operations, for example, or stop treating patients inside. It would appear that it was a relatively proportionate strike because it is targeting the outside of the building where the camera was found. That was apparently the issue. So, assuming Israel's claims that that camera was being used to record and target IDF troops is true, this strike looks to be okay. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have enough information yet to confirm that all of Israel's claims are true, but at face value, Israel's claims would seem to suggest that this was a legitimate strike carried out in a proportionate manner because it targeted the stairwell and not the building itself or the medical facilities inside.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand that this happened on Monday, and
Right.
the IDF has already been releasing information and is investigating it. As part of preparation for this podcast, I learned a little bit about this role in the IDF called the Military Advocate General, who's the chief legal authority in the IDF. I learned that this person is not a political appointee. They operate independently from the IDF chain of command. So they are like an attorney general who, even more, an attorney general is actually a political appointment. So that's not a good example. They are a person who has the independence and the power to investigate. And Israel is one of the only, if not the only, military body that investigates its soldiers while the conflict's still going on. So normally you will wait until this is over and they'll do investigations afterwards. But they're doing it already, and they have been doing it throughout this conflict. So since this person will be investigating Josiah, what is left to investigate? What kind of things are they going to be looking at this situation?
Yeah, there's a few things. So, number one, what specific shells were used? They were fired apparently from a tank. This wasn't Israeli Air Force dropping a bomb on the building. It was a tank, apparently, that fired 2 shells. They're going to want to confirm which tank, who fired them, what type of shells were used. Were these the correct type of ammunition? Was there anything smaller that could have been used? Was this the right size shell to be used in order to create enough damage but not too much damage to the hospital? Was this proportionate, essentially? So they're going to want to confirm that and make sure that the right choices were made in terms of what weapons you used in this instance. They're also going to want to confirm, was the timing correct? How many people were in the area? Were there any opportunities to take out this camera while there were any fewer people in the area, or was this area busy enough throughout the day that there were no better opportunities and the timing was correct for the strike? They're going to want to confirm that as well. If they're able to do so, they're going to want to confirm, was any warning given? In theory, this is a hospital. You should be giving a warning even if you're striking an exterior staircase and not the medical facilities inside. You should give some kind of warning if you're going to hit a hospital. So was a warning given? By who? To whom? These are the kinds of questions that they're going to want to continue to investigate. I think the last thing they're also going to want to investigate is who gave the final approval. In theory, a strike like this goes through multiple layers of approval and review. You don't hit a hospital without the military's lawyers probably weighing in on, is this a legitimate strike or not? The command, again, in theory, is supposed to come from relatively high up. Okay, it should be the head of Southern Command, the IDF Southern Command, or maybe even someone on the general staff, the IDF Chief of Staff, even might weigh in order to give the go ahead or the okay to strike a hospital. If anyone below those ranks made the final decision without notifying the higher ups that they're going to strike a hospital, that's kind of a no-no. Not kind of, that's a big no-no. That shouldn't happen. And so there's going to be, I think, an investigation to make sure that it's very clear who knew about this before it happened, who gave permission and signed off on it, and was the correct protocol or process of getting approval followed before the strike was carried out. So these are some of the details that I think still need to be determined. And I would argue it's important for us to withhold judgment on whether this was a good strike or not until some of these details come out, because these aren't little details or formalities only. They sound like technicalities, but they're actually really important
Yeah.
technicalities that do need to be sorted out before judgment is levied, I think, in terms of what happened here.
Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity for all of us friends to be reminded on how to analyze these type of stories. Every now and then we get some really unusual story coming out of Israel that or an Israeli has done something that kind of throws you off. We just did our training for our campus fellows 2 weeks ago, and then the week after, the day after, a really weird video came out of the West Bank, I think, and we were like, "What do we do with this?" It was like some soldiers coming up to a store, roughing up, not even roughing up a guy, just stealing, like taking his phone. And like, what
Mm.
is this? The caption was like, Israelis walk into a store and just steal somebody's phone. Here's what I want to hopefully equip our listeners with a little bit of guide on how to assume things. So I think we should use the international definition for anti-Semitism in these cases when it comes to the news reports on things that Israel does or Israelis do. So the definition is that 3 Ds is the double standard, demonization, and delegitimization of Israel, the Jewish people. When you're looking at stories, people reporting on this, I think we should look at a double standard. Is this story being approached with the same level of scrutiny as any other conflict around the world? Any other, like there are a lot of other conflicts going on right now, but you don't see as many new headlines about that. So, for instance, let's talk about the unfortunate civilian death toll in this case. Apparently, there were 20 people killed. Israel is saying that at least 6 of them were combatants, they were terrorists. So that will give us a ratio of one combatant per 1.2 civilians being killed. And that sounds terrible, right? For one person to have to die, an innocent civilian to have to die in order to eliminate terrorists, that is terrible. But you'll be surprised to learn that that is actually on par with the average around other conflicts around the world. I did a quick look around. For instance, for World War II, it was 1 to 2 or 1 to 3. So one combatant for every 2 to 3 civilians. And around in Vietnam War, it's also 1 to 3, maybe as high as 1 to 5. There are really high ratios, like the Russian invasion of Chechnya had 1 to 10, or even right now, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, 1 to 7. But if you look at Israel conflicts, like the Gaza war in 2014, had 1 to 1, 1 to 1.2. In this case, again, 1 to 1.2. So Israel is terrible because we believe in the image of God that human beings have to die in conflict. Unfortunately, this is the reality of living in a broken world, but the ratio is on par with the average of conflicts around the world. So this is terrible news, but friends, I think we should check ourselves to see how much attention is being given to Israel disproportionately, using a double standard that is not applied to the rest of conflicts around the world. What can
Yeah,
you tell
just
people, Josiah, about how to analyze, process when difficult stories come out of Israel?
yeah. But I just want to maybe clarify something you said, Sebastian. I think if you assume 6 out of 20 people were terrorists in the situation, that's about a 1 to 2 ratio. That's like World War II, basically. Two
Right.
two civilians for each combatant in this situation, roughly. A little bit more, but if you want to get into the decimals. But it's tragic, but you're right. It's not necessarily outside the realm of what is historically a pretty standard ratio in violent conflict. I think I would say, in terms of how Christians analyze and respond to some of this, a couple of things I would say. One, it is important to think objectively, yes, but also to think compassionately. I tell people all the time when I'm speaking at conferences or to individuals that it's important to really think as Christians about how do we engage both sides of our brain. I like to tell people I think we have two sides of the brain. You have the logic side and then you have the compassion side. And you have to be able to engage both at the same time as a Christian because we are concerned both with truth but also with love for our fellow human being. So we need to be able to think logically about this, or is this not a disproportionate attack or out of the norm for violent conflicts? We have to be able to think about that. We also have to be able to think about the fact that it's still tragic. Like, even if it's not disproportionate, it's still tragic that 14 innocent people apparently lost their lives in an effort to take out 6 terrorists, which is tragic, regardless of the necessity to deal with those terrorists and what they were doing. The important thing for Christians, I think, is to be able to hold that intention and to wrestle with both of those truths or realities. I also think it's really important for us to, in the words of James, I'm going to draw from some biblical wisdom, I think, that I rely on quite frequently. It's really important in our current environment to be slow to speak, quick to listen. And what I mean by that is, if you are online at all these days, we've been conditioned as a society to be very reactionary. The news cycle is very quick, it's very fast. A lot of information is put out there, and you're expected to, or prompted, or provoked to respond to it, react to it immediately, to be on social media and to have an opinion, to be sharing that opinion with people as fast as you can, oftentimes before all the facts are even out there. So there's not really enough time for a fact checking process, because as soon as a story breaks, you're expected to know what you think about it, to have an opinion, and to share it, and to react, to be, in many cases, pretty angry or up in arms about something that you hear for the first time. And I just don't think that that's really demonstrating the biblical wisdom that is laid out for us in the writings of people like James, who's arguing, you should be slow to anger. You should not be quick to speak. You should be quick to listen. And what I think he's trying to say, or how this applies to our current moment, where all of our information is coming to us online and we're engaging with people, sharing our opinions online or on social media, is you don't have to respond immediately. Sometimes it's better, and oftentimes, unfortunately, just the reality is you're not going to get answers in the first few minutes or first few hours after something happens. You might have to wait several days, or sometimes even a few weeks, for a full investigation to happen and all the facts to be known. And I think it's just better for Christians to wait to issue your judgment, or to fully form your opinion, to be willing to change your mind when new information comes out, and to just be patient. I think that's really the big thing that I'm trying to communicate, is we need to be less reactionary, more patient, and think more critically, and be willing to wait for all the information to come out before we get angry, or we, issue an opinion, form an opinion, and then share that opinion with everyone when it may not be based in truth. And again, as Christians, I think we we should be more patient to wait for the truth, and we should be more concerned about the truth before we speak about things like this. So that's my little rant. Sebastian, take it for what you will. I would be curious to hear your reaction to that, because obviously I feel strongly about this, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
That biblical ground is super helpful, and I think what I would add is that our support for Israel is not predicated upon Israel being perfect and never making mistakes. If at the end of this investigation it is shown that in fact Israel made a mistake, that somebody didn't follow the chain of command, the standard procedure, then Israel should give the proper punishment to that person. Like I said, they have a military advocate general who will take care of them, and people have to face the consequences of their decision legally. But Israel will make mistakes, and that's okay. We don't think Israel is perfect. We think Israel is like any other country, led by fallen human beings who make mistakes, like our own country, like we do as well. Don't be like, maybe we don't need to feel insecure or like afraid that Israel did something bad, like we can't support Israel, like I can't publicly support Israel anymore. No, Israel makes mistakes. We don't love Israel because it's perfect. We love Israel because God loves Israel, and for many other reasons. Josiah, I do have some prayer
Mhm.
points as well, but before I do that, after hearing you, it sounds like you are wrestling with some good content material that I think our students could benefit from. So I know that you just finished working on a great resource for our alumni, for our friends, people listening to this podcast. Would you like to share about this new opportunity from Passages before we close out with some prayer points?
Yeah, yeah, I would love to. I'll throw a pretty little picture up here again as well for those of you following along on YouTube. We have a brand new course that is now available. We're ready to announce this exciting news that Roots and Resolve is now available from Passages. This course really is, it's available to alumni, yes, if you're an alum listening to this podcast, but if you're someone who has not been a part of the Passages program and you would like to be a part of the Passages program, this course is especially for you. It is the gateway to Passages Leadership Program, the first place to sign up and learn more about Passages, learn more about the issues that we care about, whether that be solid biblical worldview, the importance of Jewish-Christian relations, and understanding the story, the origin story of modern Israel, Zionism, the Palestinian conflict, all those sorts of things. All the big issues that we love trying to wrestle with every week on this podcast. This is your introduction to all of those things, some of the basics that you need to know. And it also serves, this course, as like I said, the gateway to our program. So if you want to go to Israel with Passages, this is the place to start. We do ask that you take this course before applying. So we'll put a link in the show notes if you would like to sign up for this course. It's free, available now. You can sign up whenever you want and take this course. And then we would love to see you in there and to interact with you, answer any questions you might have about going to Israel with Passages, or taking this course just to learn more, if that's all you want to do. So thank you, Sebastian, for the chance to plug it. But yeah, really excited about this new course, Roots and Resolve.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity, y'all. I love the logo. Shout out to our team for developing that. And the content is going to be very helpful. And I'm excited for this new program that Josiah just shared called the Passages Leadership Program. It's a very intentional program that you really will grow you in your faith and your understanding of this region, Israel, the Bible. And then hopefully you go to Israel with us as well. So looking forward to that. All right. So to wrap it up, I think the big prayer point as I think about this situation is we should pray that this conflict will end soon. This type of situation is just a result of being in conflict, being in war. And things will continue to happen. Things like this will continue to happen. Innocent people will continue to be in danger way. Let us remember, Israel did not start this conflict. Hamas started it, and they're refusing to end it by keeping the last 20 hostages that are still alive. This conflict could end if Hamas, this evil terrorist organization, will just give them up and let their own people that they're supposed to be representing, the Palestinian people in Gaza, to return to normalcy, start rebuilding, start being rid of their oppressive regime of Hamas. So I think we need to pray that this conflict will end soon enough so that there will be no more scenarios in which these tragedies could happen. Josiah, anything else you want to add to that?
I think one thing that we didn't really discuss during this episode, but definitely has come up again in the headlines recently, is news about some of the hostages. I was reading something yesterday that there is new intelligence coming out that one or two of the hostages are now approaching a point in which they are considered to be in life-threatening condition. So
Mm.
just a reminder that it really is a pretty dire situation for the hostages. And I don't know what's going to happen in the future, if there is a hostage deal on the horizon or not. Doesn't really seem like something is going to happen in the near future, but just pray for the families, especially of the hostages, for them and for their loved ones who are still in Gaza, for their health, safety, and comfort, because it's a very difficult position for them to be in, watching this war be fought over their loved ones without being able to actually see them or help them.
Yeah. After this weekend, after this Memorial Day weekend, we will be the next weekend after that will be September 7th. That's just a month away from October 7th, 2 year anniversary of this war. That's 2 years that these Israelis have been in captivity, and that's a long time. So let's pray that it will end soon. So thank you so much for listening, y'all. If you have any questions, if you have any other examples of difficult situations that you found hard to wrestle with, let us know in the comments. Josiah and I would love to take a look at that and maybe address them in a future episode. We want to thank our producer, Lindsay, for taking care of us today. And we'll see you guys in the next episode of the Passages Pulse. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Passages Pulse. Help us grow this community by liking, sharing, and subscribing. If you like this week's episode, let us know by leaving a comment below. This podcast is a project of Passages Israel. We exist to educate the next generation of Christians on modern Israel, deepen the roots of their faith, and equip leaders to foster positive Christian engagement with Israel and the Jewish people. To learn more about Passages, follow us on social media or visit us at passagesisrael.org. Until next time, we'll keep our finger on the pulse.